Good evening, I'm Hafiz Marzukhi. Our top stories for tonight. Malaysia government to ensure trade deal with US supports reforms and sustainable growth. And Trump plans to proceed with pharmaceutical tariffs by late July. All this and more coming up on AWANI International. Malaysia is still in talks with the US to lower President Donald Trump's tariffs ahead of the August 1st deadline. Investment, Trade and Industry Minister Tengku Datuk Seri Zafrul Abdul Aziz says there's still time and opportunity to do so. According to him, the goal is to secure a deal that supports Malaysia's economic reforms and long-term sustainable growth. The minister said the deal should also safeguard market access and support emerging economies like Malaysia to build sustainable supply chains and economic systems. He also said Malaysia is awaiting further information from the Indonesian government after a 19% reciprocal tariff on Indonesia was announced by Washington. Malaysia is currently subject to a 25% tariff rate, up from the initial 24% announced in April. US President Donald Trump announced plans to impose tariffs on imported pharmaceuticals likely by the end of July. These levies may take effect around the same time as broader tariff rates scheduled to begin on August 1st.
The pharmaceuticals will be tariffed probably at the end of the month, and we're going to start off with a low tariff and give the pharmaceutical companies a year or so to build, and then we're going to make it a very high tariff because we got to move them in. Look.
Trump indicated that tariffs on pharmaceuticals could eventually reach up to 200%, aiming to encourage companies to relocate production to the United States. He noted that drug makers would have a grace period of roughly 1 year to adapt before facing higher tariffs. Meanwhile, Trump also signaled that semiconductor tariffs are expected to follow shortly thereafter, with copper used in semiconductor production facing a 50% tariff.
We'll have more after the break. Stay tuned.
Berita hebat untuk pelanggan Astro Movies dan Epic Pack. Prime Video kini termasuk dalam langganan anda.
Who's the action hero now?
Anda boleh stream 24 jam sehari. Pelbagai filem kesukaan anda.
Amazing.
Wan Janab, Hindustan.
Amazon Originals.
It's big.
Are you ready?
Serta K-Favorites terkini. Semua ni dan banyak lagi.
Kalian pilih video siapa yang akan tayang.
Pelanggan Astro Movies dan Epic Pack. Stream Prime Video sekarang dengan Astro. Anda juga boleh langgan Prime Video melalui aplikasi My Astro.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Indonesian goods entering the US will now face a 19% tariff, a decrease from the 32% initially imposed by the Trump administration. Indonesian leader Prabowo Subianto says he and US President Donald Trump have agreed to elevate trade relations between their two countries into what he calls a new era of mutual benefit.
Prabowo, however, did not provide further details of the deal. Trump had struck the pact in exchange for significant purchase commitments from Jakarta following negotiations. This included a pledge to purchase $15 billion worth of US energy, $4.5 billion in American agricultural products, and 50 Boeing jets. The deal is among only a handful secured so far by Washington, besides agreements with the UK and Vietnam ahead of the August 1st deadline. Trump has previously said other deals with India and the European Union are in the works.
US President Donald Trump says a trade agreement with Vietnam is nearly complete. However, Trump chooses not to release details of the deal as he deemed it unnecessary.
Earlier this month, Trump announced a preliminary deal to cut planned U.S. tariffs on Vietnamese imports to 20% from the 46% rate threatened in April. He also stated that goods Washington deems illegally transshipped through Vietnam would face a 40% tariff. The agreement has yet to be finalized and many details remain unclear. This included how illegal transshipment is defined, which products face the 20% tariff, and what share of value Vietnam must add to imported goods to avoid the higher levy. Vietnam has not confirmed the proposed tariff rates, instead describing the outcome as a joint statement outlining a trade framework.
US President Donald Trump says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky should not target Moscow, denying reports that he was encouraging Kiev to ramp up strikes. He reiterates that Russian President Vladimir Putin should agree to a ceasefire deal within a 50-day deadline or face further sanctions.
Trump's comments came after the Financial Times reported that Trump had privately encouraged Ukraine to strike Moscow if the U.S. provided long-range weapons. The president on Monday announced a toughened stance against Russia for its 3-year war in Ukraine, while pledging a new wave of missiles and other advanced weapons for Kiev. He revealed on Tuesday that some U.S. Patriot missiles were already on their way to Ukraine from Germany. Trump added that he had yet to speak to Putin following his announcement and declined to confirm if any talks were planned to work out a deal with Russia.
Donald Trump has announced a $92 billion USD in energy and infrastructure deals for Pennsylvania. He said the U.S. is already ahead of China in the AI race, and the new investments will help maintain that lead, pledging the U.S. will compete with Beijing in a very friendly fashion.
But we're here today because we believe that America's destiny is to dominate every industry and be the first in every technology. And that includes being the world's #1 superpower in artificial intelligence. And we are way ahead of China. I have to say, we're way ahead of China, and the plants are starting up, the construction's starting up.
The deals, said Trump, were intended to meet big tech's soaring demand for electricity to fuel the AI boom. The president had launched the Stargate project in January, aimed at investing up to $500 billion in American AI infrastructure, mostly in response to growing competition with China. He is expected to outline his own blueprint for AI advancement later this month.
Hamas and Israel indirect talks are ongoing in Doha with no set deadline, according to Qatari Foreign Ministry spokesperson Majid Al-Ansari. While he shares no details on the progress, Al-Ansari stressed that there is no stalemate. Negotiators from both sides have been in Doha since July 6, discussing a US-backed proposal for a 60-day ceasefire which include a phased release of hostages and Israeli troop withdrawals from parts of Gaza. Al-Ansari said once parties agree on a framework, talks will move to phase 2, finalizing a temporary ceasefire, and later phase 3, which will focus on a permanent truce in Gaza. Meanwhile, Axios reported that Donald Trump is set to meet Qatar's Prime Minister on Wednesday to discuss the talks. US President had repeatedly expressed hope that a deal could be reached within this week. This week, we'll discuss about the fallout from the tariff impacts on Wu says. Melissa Idris discusses this with Professor Emeritus Dr. Wu Wing Tai.
The letter is very interesting. The letter starts, I'm just paraphrasing. The letter starts off with, "It is my great honor to write to you about the relationship we have with your great country, the relationship with the extraordinary economy of the United States of America, the #1 market in the world." And it says, "But unfortunately, you've been running trade deficits. We have been running trade deficits with you. In the case of Malaysia, we will put only 25% tariff on you." And then he goes on to say, "This tariff rate can be adjusted upward or downward, depending on the relationship between the two countries. And you will not be disappointed in the United States of America." That's how the letter ended. Now, when he talks about the tariff will depend on the state of relationship between our two countries, it means that it is more than just the size of the trade deficit between us. It means that if you are too close to China, if you allow Chinese factories to be set up and export to the United States, well, then we're going to put up higher tariffs on you. And if you do not vote with us in the United Nations, well, then we may put up higher tariffs against you. So that letter is, I think it should be required reading for everybody of how to write a non-diplomatic letter in the most bombastic manner possible, with it reeking of insincerity throughout the letter. Basically, it's a threat. That was quite amazing. That's why I think that this has to be a temporary phase in US history. No normal country would, that's not normal diplomatic communications. So that's why I think it is very important for the rest of us to keep the world together until the US gets over its populist phase, gets over its present bad mood, and then it can then be a member of the Council of Elders in running the world. But until then, we, the rest of us, have to hang together in order to fight climate change, maintain global prosperity by keeping free trade, and help to keep the peace in other places of the world. That's what is important. And you could see that Donald Trump is very conscious of that. What he's doing might cause people to gang up against him, which is why he has reacted yesterday very strongly against Brazil. He imposed 50% tariff on Brazil yesterday. But on April 2nd, he had only imposed 10%. But yesterday, this is one of the few cases where the number actually jumped. On almost every case, the number that he announced is smaller than the number he had come up with on April 2nd. For the case of Brazil, it jumped from 10 to 50. So what has happened? And the amazing thing is, what is the trade balance between Brazil and the United States? The United States runs a trade balance surplus of $68 million against Brazil. The United States sells more to Brazil than buying coffee from Brazil. So, by Donald Trump's definition, since Brazil is running a trade deficit against the US, that means that the US has been ripping Brazil off.
Catch the full conversation of this on all AWANI International social media accounts at PowerFest.
Now that report wraps up AWANI International tonight. Stay tuned for our reports on the rivalries, strategies and the shifts behind the power fast driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more. Be sure to follow our social media accounts at PowerFast. I'm Hafiz Marzukhi. Thank you for watching. Good night.